Hey, welcome to A Conversation With. My name is Philip DeFranco, and today we are having a conversation with MatPat. Hello, Matt. How you doing, buddy?
I am thrilled to actually be making human contact with someone else in 2020.
This is very sad. This is my greatest form of human contact. I haven't seen like my good friends in person in forever. The only thing keeping us together is playing on like Xbox or PlayStation. Thank God for Fall Guys. Now I can play with people that don't actually play video games every day.
My gosh, Fall Guys is brilliant, right? And it's new enough that, you know, the bar is incredibly low. And so it hasn't become like esports tier yet. Give it another like month and suddenly you're not going to be able to play that thing.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about, because I've only played it for like on and off for 2 days, is if they're going to add enough maps and different game types, because I could see that getting a little boring. Anyway, video games.
What I was going to say, though, what I was going to say is I'm jealous of you, Phil, because you have people who actually want to hang out with you over Zoom calls. Like, we're scheduling Zoom calls and Google Hangouts and stuff, and it's like people, it's like pulling teeth at this point. I don't know what it is if we're not fun to hang out with, but we're having like team nights with, you know, with the Theorist crew, and we're like, hey guys, that was really fun. Let us know when you want to do it again. Radio silence. Just like either they're really good at faking it, or their social calendars are booked and we're not included.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing, the bigger your crew gets, because you're like, okay, it's time for mandatory fun, mandatory interactions. We'll figure it out. I get it. So what we do is we just try and limit the amount of time. We're like 30 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
It's easy. We'll try not to get bogged down with work, even though I feel like that's the only thing I ever talk about, because everyone's life now revolves around this one singular thing,
right?
And so we're like, okay, can't ever escape work,
right? You have your like obligatory 30 minutes of like, let's talk about the world situation, how are you doing mentally, and then maybe you can get on to like actual real world conversations.
I want to say, since you're the first YouTuber on in a while, I'm very glad that over the past 4 to 6 weeks I have not seen you at one of these parties. That I haven't had to talk about you on the show.
Right. Anytime that I escape a day without showing up in one of your thumbnails, I feel like that's a good day.
You were in maybe 2 years ago?
Yeah,
I'm trying to think the last time.
Yeah, a couple of years ago with the Defy stuff. And so that's when I was, you know, getting that clickbait face in your thumbnail, and I'm like, great, you know, made it. And honestly, that's the sort of coverage that I'm like, good, spread the word about what was going on with the whole MCN thing. But, you know, more often than not, if you're showing up in a Phil DeFranco, it's not for good reasons. And so I'm glad if I'm skating by.
Not all. It depends on how deep we're scraping for a thumbnail. I'm like, some days where we have like a 19-minute video, there's no way that anyone's going to click it. I'm like, did Dobrik do something?
Right, I was going to say.
If
if you see yourself in the thumbnail, you're hopping straight to the Today in Awesome, and you're like, oh, please let it be Today in Awesome. Please let it be Today in Awesome. Okay, awesome, I made it.
Passed. We're good. So, Matt, I don't know if you've watched the podcast recently. A lot of it is really just trying to find out who you are as a person.
Oh, wow. Good thing I'm on a couch. Do I need to lay down on the couch for my psychological assessment here? I
mean, we're gonna get to a place where I definitely want to talk to you about more YouTube-y things.
Sure.
Just actually, you know what? No. Because it's gonna be weird if I'm getting you to talk about your mom, and then I'm like, anyway, back to my YouTube channel. No, so I know that one of the things that you were mentioning before we started was that, you know, you consult for people in the YouTube game or just online. Yep. What's something that I could be doing that is better? Mr. keeps launching channels that consistently do 1 million+ views.
Well, that's really sweet. No, like, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of it is play by the rules of the game. Right, and understanding the rules of YouTube and playing by those rules. The thing that I'm always impressed with is the fact that you've been able to build a business in what is probably one of the trickiest content verticals that can possibly exist on YouTube, right? Where you're talking about controversial topics, you're talking about conspiracy theories and political intrigue and, you know, hot button issues day in and day out. And so the fact that you're able to kind of thread the needle of monetization and viewership and throttling and searchability while still being able to maintain that content, I think that's a true testament to how smartly you're running things.
That is a very political answer.
No,
I was like,
but
you didn't tell me anything, and you complimented
no,
me.
but it's totally true, right? Because like, I mean, it's hard in 2020 to create interesting but also edgy content. You know, we run tests all the time about what gets flagged in the system, what doesn't, you know, what is pushing you over the threshold, what's getting, you know, flagged for yellow buttons or reduced visibility and things like that. And it's some of the most extreme, like, it's some of the most dumb things, minutiae that you would never think of, right? Like in one thumbnail, we had Shrek, Donkey from Shrek, being unzipped to reveal like someone inside, and it got flagged because it was like inappropriate use of a character, or like extreme violent use of a character. And you would never think that sort of thing, but it's small stuff like that. Or on Film Theory, we just had Gordon Ramsay. We did an episode over on Food Theory about Gordon Ramsay versus Bobby Flay, and of course Gordon Ramsay curses all the time. And, you know, he beeps once, one censored beep from a completely separate video, you're doing okay. Two censored beeps, suddenly you're flagged for reduced visibility.
Really?
Things like that. And so, you know, we're always trying to find where those limits are, because shockingly, we're edgier as a result, because we're talking about murdered children over on Game Theory, and we're talking about, like, you know, how to blow up Gotham City, which is a stand-in for New York, over on Film Theory. And so we're also always trying to thread those lines. But yeah, like, so congratulations to you, kudos to you for doing as well as you are. Like, I think you're doing great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're constantly having to figure stuff out. And then I think what also makes it hard is that if it was all uniformly hit at the beginning when you upload a video, it would be so great. We had a video where I hate it. We talk about, I did 9 minutes on a census on the census and the importance of the census, and then I'm like, but I got to put Jake Paul in this fucking thumbnail because his house got raided. And so it was performing as our #1 video, and then I think the system got hit because we had guns in the thumbnail. And I was like, well, okay, anyway.
Yeah. Right. That's the thing is, and that's what we try to tell YouTube, because not only do we consult other YouTubers and businesses how to kind of understand the ecosystem, how to understand online audiences, things like that, but we're also trying to pretty regularly give feedback to YouTube as business owners, as content creators, as people who talk to a lot of content creators, both small and large. Hey, here's some of the biggest challenges with your platform. And time again is lack of consistency and lack of communication. And the thing that we say is like, hey, if there are certain thresholds that you cross, or if it is 2 censor beeps or an extreme image plus something in whatever, like, tell us what the scale is, because I would say 90% of YouTube creators want to play by the rules. They just want to know where the boundaries are so that they can create the best content without having to worry about their content being flagged. And I know YouTube's worry is that there's going to be some bad actors out there who are going to exploit the system and figure out the loophole and just dive in and make the system trash.
I don't think that's completely misplaced. I think we saw that, and probably to a certain degree still see that with kids content. Like,
oh yeah,
like
100%.
3 years ago it was I mean, I've like removed YouTube from my son's access, like, just because even today it's like, he's like, have you heard about, what is it? He was like, Lighthead? What is it? Siren Head? And I was like,
yeah, Siren Head,
and I was
absolutely.
like, what is that? And whose knees am I going to be breaking? Also, this is my fault because I shouldn't have left you alone for 45 minutes because apparently the algorithm was going to bring you to this place.
It is uncanny how fast you go down that rabbit hole and how immediate it is. I don't know how kids do it, but you give them a couple of clicks and immediately they find like the worst possible thing they could possibly land on.
Yeah.
So suddenly they're talking about, whatever conspiracy, does jet fuel burn down like iron girders or whatever, and you're like, how did you get there from Baby Shark? What went wrong here?
Hey, a question I had though before we jump into kind of the more personal stuff, when you're creating new things, because you're established as far as it's concerned regarding film, you're established with gaming. What was your kind of thinking regarding launching this new food channel, or were you just like, food content does well?
No, I mean, for us, we've always said that our channels are gaming or film channels disguised, or sorry, they're educational channels disguised as gaming and film channels, right? Where sure, you might be coming for Five Nights at Freddy's or Super Mario or Frozen or Disney or whatever, but what we're trying to do with each video, and some have it more than others, is expose you to some critical thinking piece, or getting you to question some preconceived notion that you had about whatever that franchise is, or teach you about math or physics or science or psychology or whatever. And so for us, what it means to be a theorist is just overthinking and overanalyzing all your favorite things in life. And for us, food seemed like the next obvious choice, because who doesn't love to eat? I love fast food. Gamers love fast food. There's a lot of overlap with food culture and entertainment culture, from the food that characters and players consume within video games, to fictional foods in movies, to, food mascots being kind of like animated characters and things like that. So it felt like the next progression of how do you take what it means to be a theorist and kind of broaden it out to a wider swath of people. We would have loved to have done like sports or music, because those actually seem like more obvious extensions to what we do. Mm-hmm. But by the nature of copyright and rights issues on digital platforms, there's no way. Like, we did the dance. We talked to the sports leagues to see what it would take to potentially, be able to use some of their footage. That was a non-starter. And obviously music is going to smack us down as soon as we upload anything. And so we're like, what's a safe category? And again, this goes back to that first question you said. What is playing by the rules of YouTube in 2020? Mm-hmm. Food content is clearly something that they're looking for. It does well. We, from the data that we have, it monetizes well. And so we're like, this is not only a great adjacent content vertical to what we're doing, it's something that we're really excited about talking about. It's obviously huge in 2020 since everyone's stuck at home in the kitchens cooking. Like, let's just talk about it. Let's optimize it.
So, I mean, with now these, I mean, the newest one is already killing it. You're on track to have then 3 killer channels. What's a win for you these days? Like, if you're actively winning with these videos, and you're not getting kind of bogged down by the performance of each individual video, which sometimes happens as a creator, what's winning to you? Like, you doing what you got to do now. What's next? What do you see as like, that would be a big win for me?
That's a really good question, actually. Food Theory was a big win. It had been 5 years since we'd officially launched a new channel. And I think when you're a larger creator on this platform, there's a fear of doing anything that breaks you out of kind of what audiences know you for, right? You are the gamer guy, you are the beauty guru, you are whatever, and you're kind of pigeonholed into your lane. And, if all of a sudden you release something and it flops or it falls on its face, it's like, the audience isn't going to let you forget it. And, is he really that influential or whatever? And so I think Food Theory, I was scared going into Food Theory, because I'm like, will the audience get it? Will they understand what we're going for? Like, I see, unlike film, which is an obvious extension of gaming, like, I see where the connections are. Food is such a big jump. And so to see the audience so eagerly try it out, embrace the format, and say, oh, I didn't get it, but now I do, and I'm excited about it, that's a huge win for me. Honestly, to me, at this point in my career, winning is being able to look at the content that we're making and still be proud of it, because it's hard in 2020 to maintain high quality cadence at the rates that YouTube wants it to be. And also winning is seeing the audience still being excited and still letting me know that, hey, I watched your video and it helped me pass a test. Or, hey, I watched this video and I went to the grocery store and saw exactly what you were talking about and, didn't let it fool me, or stuff like that. Like, being able to see the audience take away real tangible benefits from our videos, that's the win to me, because it means that we're not just entertainment, and there's certainly value to be had there, but we're actually delivering value to the viewers who are consuming what we're doing.
So would you say then the larger split out of what brings you joy from that is the end user reaction kind of more of a outside validation rather than like, let's say you put out a killer video.
Yeah.
You're like that, and for whatever reason, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's whatever.
Yeah.
It only gets 300,000 views.
Yep.
Probably a number that like gives you a pit in your stomach. Of like, oh, this is the beginning of the end, which is like a weird thing to say to so many people. But do you experience far less joy? Is it more worry, or knowing that there were still hundreds of thousands of people that took something from it?
Yeah.
Does that keep you afloat?
I think for us, I mean, for me personally, it's always a balance, right? And this is just the way that we run the channel. It's also one of the things that I talk to when we're talking to kind of more established YouTubers who've been running on the treadmill for 5, 6, 7 years. Is there's fulfilling what your audience expects and kind of what you're known for, and the stuff that's keeping you in business, that's keeping the lights on, that's keeping the channel healthy. But there's also the passion projects or more experimental things that you're doing for yourself, right? And if you go in under the expectation and under the goal of this might not do well, but I'm glad that I talked about it, I'm glad that I did it. It was a new experiment and it didn't work, but so be it. At least I did it for myself. I think it's finding that balance as kind of like a larger channel on the platform. It's, you know, how do I keep the business side happy, but then how do I also mix in videos that's keeping me creatively engaged, creatively satisfied, and stuff that I can look at and be proud of. And it's a hard balance to strike, but I think that's what allows you to kind of maintain a level of health and happiness long term. Because for me, honestly, like going into the launch of Food Theory, I was feeling burnout real hard. I think you look across YouTube at this point and you're seeing a lot of people leaving the platform, taking extended breaks. You're seeing those breaks happening at more frequency because people have been doing this for 7+ years. And, you know, even you're talking about at the end of this year, like, hey, things are going to change. I'm, you know, my life is becoming a focus for me rather than my business or you know, it's becoming a focus in a different way, right?
Yeah, to a certain degree, yeah.
Yeah. And it kind of naturally has to be that way. And so for us, the thing that we always say is, like, for me at that point, it was, I'm feeling really burned out by doing like the same franchises, comic book movies, you know, indie horror games, this and that. Food Theory was that breath of fresh air that gave me here's opening up a whole new world of topics. Here's opening up a whole new like way of thinking for me that's giving me new life, and that I can then apply back to the work that I'm doing on the other channels, and everything kind of feels fresh and new again, and it's exciting again.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a question then connected to that answer, possibly, unless it's something else. How would you describe your proudest moment?
Ooh, wow. This is getting deep. Man, the first question, right, is what is your proudest moment? I've never really thought about that. Ooh, can I okay. To stall for time here, Phil, can I toss it
You're
back
like,
to you?
about Food Theory, and I'm like, stop it.
Yeah, watch Food Theory. That's a thing. Go watch that. No, let me toss it back to you, Phil. What's your proudest moment? That'll stall for time while I think of mine.
Ooh, what a deflection. So for personal, obviously, it's not even the birth of my children. I think it's the actively seeing them grow and the and seeing like certain good instilled things or learned behaviors that stemmed from like a bad moment. Right. That makes me feel good. So all of that kind of merges into a proud moment. And then for business, so I think there was a certain time where I would say when I initially sold my company, and I got to see that number in my bank account that I always wanted to see, and I got so much outside validation of, oh my God, he's such a businessman, he's so smart. Even though I ended up resenting that deal greatly.
I was gonna say, even though it soured in later years, sure.
Yeah. But I would say probably the first time we did a live show. Oh, and I lost my earbud. Probably the first time we did a live show, which was in Ireland, maybe 8 years ago. I'm probably placing that wrong.
Sure.
But we ended up doing it after we decided to do. We'll go to Trafalgar Square and we'll do a meetup in the UK, and it'll be fun. And it became this very scary moment where it was just like there were too many people. We had 3 security guards. Like we thought that was going to be great.
Wow, yeah.
Overwhelmed, swarmed, fun time until it got scary.
Yep.
It was one of those moments that if someone did that on my show today, I'd be like, "What are you doing, you idiot?" There's been a decade of evidence of why you're not supposed to do this. But then we had
shocking, irresponsible YouTuber does dangerous meetup in Trafalgar Square.
Yeah, exactly. And but no, then so after that we were like, well, how are we going to do this? We promised that we would do meetups, and there was like an odd amount of excitement out of Ireland, even though it's only about 2% of our audience, the most passionate part of our fan base. And we were like, how there's like 2,000 people that say they want to come. What if we sold tickets? Maybe there would be like 300 people. We mentioned that we want to sell tickets. Almost 100% completely still on board. We had never done anything like that. And then a buddy, as it always happens, it's like a buddy through a buddy through a buddy knew someone that was willing to do something. And I think Coca-Cola gave us like $10,000 to $20,000 to hold an event.
Are you kidding? I have been... Man, Coca! I am so betrayed by Coca-Cola.
Here's the thing. It was like under the amount that this executive, because there's like a certain amount where they'd have to get approval. So I feel like it was somewhere I think it was somewhere like 10 to 15,000, and then we were like, and then the rest will be covered by tickets, because I think we charge like $20 to $40, something relatively low, because we were like, we're YouTubers, we can. Once again, but going on stage and performing for 2 hours in what was kind of like a ripoff of Kevin Smith's Q&As that turned into storytelling. It was like me and my editor.
Absolutely.
It was just,
that's great.
And it was great. Yeah. And so it was like kind of the first moment it felt real. I came on to some Jay-Z and Kanye. I felt like a rock star.
Oh wow! Oh man, you're doing your strut walk. It's like a wrestling match.
I'm pretty sure I came out in a not a trench coat esque. It was a very weird moment.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but it was so I would say that was the moment that the audience became real to me. Because otherwise, I'm just in my room by myself, or you're working on scripts and the animation and the editing process, and it doesn't feel real. Did I buy you enough time?
You did, actually. That was actually fantastic. Totally same with you on the personal front, where now that we have Oliver, who just had his 2-year birthday a couple weeks ago. That's been, it shifts your world, right? And it shifts your perspective. And so on the personal front, like you said, not so much the birth, but seeing him develop into his own independent human being is incredible, right? And you being there to serve as a mentor and guide to him is just one of those. That is so incredibly fulfilling in a way that I would have never anticipated. The example that comes to mind, right, and it's such a minor thing, but it feels so huge for these first 2 years, is he had his first fear maybe like a couple months ago, right, where we were reading a book. It was a new book to him, and there's a bison in it. And it's a big, jarring image of this like dark, mean-faced bison, and we're reading the book, and then all of a sudden he's scared of the bison. And you're like, oh no, like I've just traumatized my child for life because I was reading him this book. It's over. I'm a terrible parent. And so Steph and I, we throughout the day, we're like, okay, we'll skip that page. But he wanted to keep reading the book over and over again. So we would always kind of like skip the page. Like you would see him get nervous because he knew it was coming. And so we'd be like, okay. And then we move on to the next thing. But we're like, how do we solve this? And, we have our entire house is, owned floor to ceiling by Google. And so we have our Google Home, and we're like, hey, Google, what sound does a bison make? And it makes this kind of like funny sound. And we're like, it's a funny sound. It sounds like a fart. And, you see him kind of like, you see the ice melting a little bit, and you see him kind of like coming forward. And he's like, what sound but bison make? And so we kept asking over and over again. And through that exposure and through us like laughing about it together and this and that, you saw that fear just melt away. And now, a month later or whatever, a bison is his favorite animal.
I love that.
Which is just... Yeah, it's just one of those really cool moments where he took that fear, got over it, and you see him like embrace it as a strength. And that was one of those like, we saw, that was like that parenting challenge of how do we, deal with this and, empower him to get over it in the future. And like, so that from a personal side is exactly what you said. Like that to me is a super proud moment there. On the professional side, it's interesting, right? Because for me, like there are the highlights about like crossing 10 million subscribers and getting like the big diamond play button and those huge milestones, the first million on Game Theory, like amazing. But the one and those are fine, but ultimately they're also kind of like empty. It's just a threshold that gets rewarded arbitrarily. And so when I think back and like what is one of the proudest moments, we were at VidCon Europe and I had just finished doing like an on-stage presentation or whatever. And I go off and I meet some fans off to the sides of the stage. And this one girl stops me. She's last in line and she's waiting for me. And she comes up to me and she, like, tears in her eyes, tells me the story of how she didn't speak for 2 to 3 years. Like something in her life had basically made her go mute where she felt like she was voiceless. And so she just refused to speak to anyone. And something about watching a particular video of ours gave her the inspiration or the courage to like find her voice again. And, and that was the moment that really hit home to me about the power that online creators have and the level of emotional connection that I mean, and our videos aren't anything like emotional, right? Like we're just goofing off, nerding out about science of Super Mario. Like how ridiculous is that? But something about it just like touched her in the right way and changed her life for the better. And I think like that was the moment where it's like it makes the numbers real. It makes because it's so easy to get desensitized to like 100,000, million, 2 million, 10 million, whatever. Those are people. Those are individual people who have individual lives and are taking their time to spend it with you and to support you and who are inviting you into their households, into their beds, onto their phones, whatever, so that way you can spend time together. And that moment made it so viscerally real. And yeah, I'd say that that's probably my proudest moment.
See, I love hearing you talk about the audience that way. I think a lot of my frustration with and I don't want to kind of paint everyone with a broad brush, but some of the newer creators, some of the creators that, in the beginning I kind of joked about going to parties or being a bad example. It feels like just this it feels like an example of you don't actually care about the people that are watching you. Yeah. Right? Because they're 100%. And maybe part of it's from ignorance, right? Because at that point it's fueled by it's about me. It's about the numbers. It's not, and they take pictures of people, but they don't maybe have like that deep connection that you talked about. And maybe that, how many years or how long did it take from when you started to like when you had a moment like that?
Honestly, so I actually attribute it to the different generations of YouTube. So Steph and I have this internal way of talking about the eras of YouTube, right? So Gen 1 was the viral videos. Early days, you didn't know the individual creators. You knew the titles of videos. You knew Chocolate Rain. You knew Sneezing Baby Panda. You knew Double Rainbow. You knew, all of those. You knew them by the video title, not like, oh, that's Tazon Day. You didn't know what their, who that creator necessarily was. And then Generation 2 were the people, the OG YouTubers, right? Who, hey, I have a viral hit here. If I keep doing largely the same thing or something of similar ilk week in and week out, people are going to come to know who I am, right? So, the Jenna Marbles of the world, the Smoshes of the world, things like that, who are like, I can make a brand for myself, whether they realized it or not, by doing kind of similar videos at a similar cadence, and people just tune in. Gen 3 came in 2012, where there was the algorithm shift away from viewership as the primary metric to watch time. And overnight, you saw kind of like the world of content shift into gamers and vloggers, right? People who are able to produce long form content at a very regular cadence suddenly were optimized for this new world order that was YouTube and surged onto the platform in resounding numbers. That one lasted a long time. And then you have Gen 4, which is I guess for lack of a better word, kind of like the Vine generation, but it's the first generation of creators who grew up knowing that YouTube and digital media is a place where money can be had, where stars are made, and where you can have a brand. And I think, you know, and from talking to a lot of those creators, they're some of the sharpest on the platform. You know, they go in knowing all the tropes of like, comment, and subscribe. They know what an algorithm is. They know that watch time is important. They know, you know, how to optimize for an end card push and this and that. And so but they're approaching it with fresh eyes. And so they grew up with this stuff, and now they're like, how do I remix it and make it even better than it was when I was growing up? And I think that's one of the fundamental shifts there, is when a lot of us older school people on the platform were coming up, it was about finding a place to talk. It wasn't fulfilling a business need. It wasn't to make a brand in a lot of cases. It was to find an outlet, to put yourself out there. Like for me, it started as a resume item. Like I was just making a YouTube channel to show that I could do things that were fun and interesting and that people would be interested in watching, so I could get a job when no one was willing to hire me.
Yeah, and I joined because I was lonely and I felt like I didn't have a voice. Yeah, so I feel you there.
Right.
And it just so happens exactly that a lot of the things that brought us to the platform to want to connect to people also turned out to be raw and not so refined, but fantastic marketing tools, right?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, you're like, engage with me, make me feel less alone. And then the algorithm was like, yes, do that. Stay longer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, right? Is, you know, we started not to have a business in digital media in a lot of cases. We started as a means of having an outlet. And then all of a sudden, like, we're met with a choice, right? Where, hey, this is making money. People are watching me, you know, and so like I need to kind of make this into what it can potentially be. Like I stay the course and kind of just keep doing my thing, or I blow it out into something bigger. But at its core, it always started as a means of connection. And you were excited for that first 10,000 subscribers. You were blown away that 30,000 people would watch your videos. And as it scaled up and scaled up and scaled up, it was always born out of, those are individual people and there's a community here. Whereas nowadays, community is kind of just like the buzzword, and it's kind of like, I can acknowledge that the community is there, but it's just numbers, I think, for a lot of people. It's a means to an end.
Do you feel like so based off of the last generation that you talked about, which I know you in the past, you did a video on it, and I think you used Logan and Jake Paul as kind of the example of like this new generation that came up. Do you feel like let's say if it's still around by the time that some people are watching this video, the TikTok generation are out here, do you feel like that's just an extension of the same, or this is like a new evolution?
No, I think I feel like right now we're in a fifth generation, and I think it's a combination of exactly what you said. TikTok, I think, is a big market changer. I think the increased levels of brand awareness and sensitivities on like YouTube itself has changed as a platform, and so you're seeing a big shift in, you know, what is and isn't allowed on the platform. And I think that's impacting content and the content creators that are surging. So the brand safety element, and also the more focus on diversity and social awareness. That 2020, obviously, it's been a touchstone of 2020, but even before that, right, of being more community oriented, of lifting up alternative voices, you know, of giving back to the community, of being, again, like this, going back to like, hey, I'm like, Mr. Beast is a great example of that, right? Where his videos are all about giving back to the people who are watching, who are doing good work out there, and taking, hey, I'm in a position of importance and power and money, but I'm not using it necessarily to better myself. I'm using it to give back. I feel like all of those things are combining into whatever this fifth generation is. I haven't been able to really figure out like what is the theme of it, or kind of like what's the combining factor of it all. But it feels like we're on the cusp of this big turnover, and it kind of remains to be seen of what comes of it. But I think you're 100% right. I think TikTok and all of that is one component of what is this next generation.
Yeah, I mean, this current one, and I mean, I have a lot of mixed feelings when it comes to TikTok and China,
sure,
in general.
Sure.
But one of the things I will say is when I think of TikTok, I know a lot of people, you know, they think about like the Charlie and Dixie D'Amelios and all the kind of big people off of what I guess what people on TikTok would call the straight side of TikTok. But what's exciting to me are the middle-sized people on TikTok. It hasn't felt like we've it sounds so weird because it sounds like I'm bashing everybody. It's felt like a long time since we've seen regular people pop up, like genuinely like interesting people that have specialties, have a lot of like experience. I don't want to. I'm going to say educated, but I feel like hopefully people will understand that I'm not calling everyone dumb. But just things that get me engaged and interesting. It's the only app that now keeps me up at night at sometimes. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I just want to take a second to thank one of the sponsors of today's episode of A Conversation With, HeroHealth.com/DeFranco. Remembering to take medication, it can be tough. Forgetting is annoyingly easy, and it's even harder if you're helping someone that you care about with their pills. And so that's why the Hero is so amazing. Hero is basically a medicine cabinet reinvented, right? The Hero pill dispenser sorts all of your daily medications and it delivers them with the push of a button. And if that medication is not taken on schedule, the Hero app will send a notification to you, a family member, or a caregiver so a dose is never missed. Basically, Hero makes it simple and easy to make sure you or a loved one stays on track and you get the right meds at the right time every time. A Hero membership includes the app, the pill dispenser, and 24/7 support for just $1 a day. They even have an optional service that delivers medication directly to your door as well. Never miss a dose again and always have peace of mind with Hero. And right now, if you go to HeroHealth.com/DeFranco, you'll get 50% off the initiation fee and a 30-day risk-free trial with a money-back guarantee. Don't forget, that's HeroHealth.com/DeFranco to get started today. But that's all for now, and back to your regularly scheduled podcast. To kind of go back, Matt, a question I always like to ask smart people, and hopefully you don't Dr. Mike me and say that you don't have any. Who is your... sorry, I always have to shade him at least once per episode. Who is your greatest teacher and why?
Oh, okay. Wow. Who's my greatest teacher and why? Interesting. I would say... I would actually say Stephanie, my wife.
Really?
So she and I have been together for over 10 years at this point, like a long, long time ago, way, way back. And before meeting her, I think I was always insecure about who I was, right? Like I was in theater and I liked playing characters. And even in my day-to-day life, I would play a character, right? And Stephanie was the first person to really teach me amongst a number of different things. But she was the one who taught me that, like, hey, being Matthew is enough. And if people don't like that or don't understand it or whatever, like, that's on them, because you are a worthwhile person who doesn't necessarily need to like go out of your way to please everyone and be everything to everybody. You can just be yourself and be confident in who you are, and who you are is a beautiful person. And that shifted my perspective, I think, and it made me reevaluate how I was interacting with everyone around me and the outside world, and it made me feel like a more authentic, genuine, complete person, because I wasn't projecting what other people wanted me to be, but instead I was able to kind of just settle into who I was.
I love that, just because whenever I think of people, I always think of kind of a 3-tier pyramid. I think that one of the most important things for everyday happiness and kind of fulfillment in life is that emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah.
And then followed by street smarts, which I always just think is kind of like, it helps in like marketing and kind of understanding how to hustle, and then book smarts. Unless you're like a scientist, in which case the pyramid is not that.
Right, flip it a little bit. Yep.
But yeah, I love that. I mean, and I think that's also like the hardest thing, because to go back to something you said earlier, I mean, we get so much of the validation from kind of outside. I do like, though, that you did mention kind of that you were adding to people's lives, and it's not just that they're just watching you, spending that time, that you see every single video you post, and it's like 5.7 million years were wasted watching this video, and you're just like, was it additive? Was it additive to the world? Did we just, how much electricity is that? What's the carbon footprint of this video? How many houses could have been built?
I was going to say, how many houses could we have powered with the wasted human energy of this? No, and honestly, like, it is, for as much as there is that external validation, there is also that internal validation. And I think for me, a lot of times, like, I'll look out into the YouTube ecosystem and the TikTok ecosystem and, you know, across all these various platforms, right? And, you know, I'll get jealous and frustrated about some of the people that you see surging through the ranks, and look at how many subscribers they're getting, how many millions of views they're getting, how many millions of dollars they're getting, right? And it's like, really, this is the stuff that's taking off, and like, I'm smart enough, I should be able to like have that same level of explosive growth or whatever. But then I always come back to, but would I be happy with the stuff that I'm doing? Would I be happy with the content that I'm making? And could I show it to Oliver when he grows up and still be proud of the stuff that I did? And I think, you know, maybe not every video, especially in my earlier days, would be ones that I'm like super proud of, or tastes have changed, or I've kind of matured as a creator, certainly. But it's one of those things where, yeah, like, sure, we're not doing 500 million views a month or anything like that, but, you know, I can look back and say the stuff that I made is stuff that I'm proud of, has a level of polish that, you know, I'm proud to associate my name with, and is, you know, doing its best to at least be a little bit more nutritious from a content perspective than just, you know, mind candy.
Totally. So, okay, so if there was one thing that you think people get wrong about you when they watch your videos, maybe the wrong impression, or maybe something they don't understand about you, what is it?
That's a fun one. I feel like a lot of times I'm kind of a lightning rod of hate for a lot of fandoms out there. What we do unintentionally, I think, frustrates a lot of fandoms. I see, like, it's interesting. I think it's a different perspective, and we've run psychological tests on our audience, right? And so at this point, I have data to show that there is just a different there's a different mindset to our viewers versus I think the people who get mad about our videos, right? So when I make a video about like, Sonic is actually slow, or this character was actually dead the entire time, to me, it's all in fun, right? It's all like what if scenarios. Let's go over the top with it. I'm a storyteller, and let's just go on an adventure together. Let's go on this hypothetical journey. But I think for a lot of people in the audience who are in those fandoms, they might get frustrated because they've attached a lot of, you know, emotional stakes or identity, or just are unwilling to kind of like engage with their, you know, the IP in that sort of way. And they get mad that I, you know, called so-and-so a liar, or, you know, debunked that this person would be able to survive X, Y, and Z. And so I think that's the thing that a lot of people probably get wrong about me is I never, as far as I can tell, I don't have ill intent with my videos, right? I don't mean to demean people or fandoms or things like that. Like when I poke fun at them, when I offer alternative suggestions, when I say like, oh, this person actually sucks, it's more for fun than it is like actively trying to take down people. And I mean, you probably understand better than most of YouTube creators, I would say. Like, you do your best to research things and, you know, get all the facts right and make sure that you're all buttoned up on everything. But sometimes things slip through the cracks. And
yeah, I mean,
I think
there's a mixture of stuff. I mean, one, people will always project intent because how can you ever really know what's going on? And the unfortunate thing is the intent then goes through whatever lens they have of you. And then, yeah, I mean, I hear you on the research. I do think that unfortunately we live at a time that depending on which tribe you're in, people falsely equate mistakes that are made with the knowing spreading of falsehoods for like, so your side wins, which is really frustrating because then it's like, because you allow someone to talk over whatever time period and eventually mistakes will happen. But yeah, it's rough in that way. But so you think, okay, so is there a moment where, regardless of the intent, because sometimes the end result can kind of override whatever intent we had, right? Whether you're like, well, my intent was to be somewhat edgy, and there was
Sure,
no
right.
hate in my heart. But
Yep.
what I said like fell flat, or like, is there a moment where you're just like, oh, that was a mistake, and I wish I could have taken that back?
Yeah, for the most part, I feel really good about a lot of the moves that we've made, and that like, and I stand by pretty much all the videos that I've done. There's a couple that I regret, and that, you know, maybe I relied on like a research team a bit too much and should have double checked some work, or, you know, like maybe I shouldn't have dipped into areas where I wasn't as much of an expert, or, you know, needed to give more time in the cooker or whatever. I think probably the one that I might regret the most at this point, though, is at the beginning of the coronavirus stuff, when news was just starting to take off and this and that. We did a video about who would survive coronavirus, like which video game character would survive coronavirus, and who would die in coronavirus. And again, it was me taking like, hey, here's a topical thing that, you know, we can include some level of information about, you know, what is proper mask wearing, how do masks fit, you know, what is the CDC saying as far as like what sort of masks you should be wearing,
Sure.
and things like that, and apply it to video game characters. And, you know, like, oh, his beard is gonna break the seal, and so, or this guy's old, and, you know, here's the actual death statistics and things like that. Like, I saw it as just like another way to kind of take a real world event and spread some level of education and a little bit of information about it through the lens of what we do, right? Which is like, oh, it's video game characters, who cares? And in retro, and I think at the time too, we weren't expecting it to be what it became, right? Where at this, like, by the time that video came out, the death tolls were already starting to rise, and, you know, it was becoming clear that this was much bigger than kind of what we initially anticipated it as. And I think I got lulled into a false sense of security, because the meme-verse was making all sorts of jokes about like coronavirus and mask wearing and this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, if the meme-verse is okay with it, then we should be okay to do our version of a video.
That was like that was the bar. That was
I
like
mean,
the gauge.
Well, you see stuff on like, you know, Twitter and Reddit and things, like people engaging with it, having fun with it. I'm like, okay, if people are having fun with it, then it's fine. And then the video went up, and it's like, and I still stood by it. There was some pushback, but now a couple months later, looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that was probably tasteless. That was in, you know, it's kind of disrespect. It's definitely, you know, disrespecting the people who, you know, lost loved ones from this. And it, even though our intent was to spread more well-researched information about what this was going on at a time when information was coming from all these different things, and we had done our best to filter it to like, what is the most trustworthy sources. The actual branding of the episode around like who's gonna die was probably not in the best taste. And so that's one that I look back on, I'm like, yeah, that I should have handled that one differently.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's interesting to think about, because I imagine it's been humbling for a lot of people that are kind of willing to understand and appreciate the real severity of the situation.
Yeah.
You know, it's just kind of like almost everything that we've experienced over the past however many years of just, okay, that's insane, and then you get used to it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Like the panic for some felt bigger when there were 400 cases
Yeah.
a day.
Right.
And now it's like, oh yeah, another 1,000 people died. And
Right.
it's just like, yeah, that's what's happening now. You're
Yeah.
just like, how did we get here? But it was interesting to see that, because yeah, when you're talking about the meme verse, it was like when I was scrolling through TikTok, it was like all jokes, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, by the way, you're not gonna be able to we recommend you just don't go outside
Yeah.
for a bit. Also, you might not have toilet paper. That's just apparently a thing that's gonna happen.
Right.
now. You're like, oh shit, this is actually affecting me. And that's been, I think, a frustrating thing for me, is seeing how many people end up taking it serious only after like someone they know gets it.
Yeah.
And you're just like, God damn it.
Right.
Have you, I don't know if you're comfortable with talking about it. Have you had anyone that's been impacted by it?
Yeah, actually, someone in our family right now has it. Older individual, so we're hoping for the best with him. I also, strangely enough, I make the joke with Steph that I was patient zero, but I honestly think that I might have had it before it was diagnosed, or before people knew actually what it was. Because in November of last year, I had this mysterious severe case of bronchitis that no test would come back positive. But I had the vomiting, I had all the flu-like symptoms, I had this severe respiratory thing that like you could physically hear me wheezing every time I took a breath. I attributed it to bad like air quality or bad allergies in the case of like wildfires in LA or something like that. But, I went to the doctor 4 separate times. They kept being like, we're testing you for everything and we can't figure out what this thing is. Mm-hmm. We're giving you chest x-rays. We're giving you Z-Paks. We're treating you for everything that we can fundamentally think it is, and nothing is working. And it literally knocked me down for, the 2-3 weeks that,
wow.
Like it was kind of everything that I've heard about since then. And I had just gotten back from a trip to the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, where we were doing a big gaming convention out there. So we were doing a lot of travel in and around Asia around that time. So, it's one of those things where I haven't gotten an antibody test, and I really want to. But I'm like, I
have the
think
positivity rates on that been kind of confirmed? Because my wife has a similar but different story. So it was like out of nowhere, the same day that we closed the office, she was just like, I don't know what's happening, but this is
really
insane fever, crazy pain, respiratory problems. But her thing ended up only like really completely fucking her over for 3 days. I mean, it was the worst 3 days of her life.
Sure.
But she ends up taking an antibody test, gets a negative, but then it also came at the time when they were like flooding the market with antibody tests, and they were like, they have maybe we don't know what the percentage is, but also, I mean, when I've talked to doctors, they're like, it is possible, like that the timeline was different, but I mean, there's also just respiratory stuff that comes through that just like slams people. So I don't know. Yeah,
no, it's totally true, and I agree. Like, for me to have gotten it in like mid to late November seems so incredibly early in this whole process, and I'm like, there's no way, and that's why I've been kind of like, dismissing it this entire time. But the more I think back on it, I realized that I had all the like weird stomach stuff at the exact same time that I had the respiratory stuff, and it's like, that's just strange. And as more symptoms have come up, it's aligned. But for me, it's partly I want an antibody test, like you said, like the confirmation rates are questionable at best still. But I'd love to know, one, for my knowledge, but two, more importantly, I'd love to actually like be able to give, like if I did indeed have it, like I'd love to give blood and, be able to give those up to research or help people along in some way. So that way, it just forwards the progress that much faster.
Yeah, the also is something that's been interesting. We haven't even talked about it on the show, but is like the emergence of false positives.
Yep.
And it usually only you usually only hear it with celebrities because they're the ones that like have to like publicly announce it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one maybe I might be getting this wrong. I know it was a football player. It might have been Jay Cutler. But it was something where it was like announced that he had it. And then his wife ended up was essentially harassed even after it came out that it was like, oh, it was actually a false positive, where it was like, I guess her kids were getting like yelled like, why are your kids here at the park? And it's like, no, it was actually a fault, like trying to explain this.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, you become for 14 days a like social pariah. Right. Because everyone sees the first big announcement and not the second. Oh, actually, never mind. Actually, it turns out sometimes there's a false positive. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, and I think that's one of the interesting things about just like content and everything in the modern age. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about like, what don't people understand, or like what's a misconception that people might have about you or whatever. Like, even if you apologize or address an issue or a complaint or something that people have had, there's literally zero guarantee. And in fact, it's not very likely that the people who are mad at you in the first place are seeing the thing that you're responding with, right? Like you said, everyone sees that first announcement, but no one sees the retraction afterward. And we talk about this actually every once in a while on Film Theory and Game Theory, where we'll cite a study that was then retracted, and we'll talk about that story about like, this person did this scientific thing, it got published, and then the retraction happened 2 months later, but by then the damage was done, right? Everyone thought that emotions affect, how snowflakes form or things like that.
Or people think that vaccines cause autism.
Or, yes, very much so. I didn't want to be the one to demonetize your video, so, I put that in your
Oh,
report.
it's fine. Why do you think? Literally every piece of content, like my whole output, we literally have to have a sponsor or like a big like launch for everything, because even the videos that don't get demonetized get demonetized for several hours.
Yeah.
And it's usually when people watch the video.
Right, of course. It's always right when people are excited to watch it. Yeah, I can only imagine that your creator studio must look like a Christmas tree with all the like orange and green and yellow buttons.
Flickers on and off. That's the thing. Is like so there were, obviously we had to talk about Beirut last week. We didn't even try to monetize it.
Of course.
But it was like sometimes even just referencing the video hurt us. But we actually have a good-ish monetization rate, but the automatic system, even with the new thing that they launched, where it's like, okay, give us 20 minutes,
right?
We'll properly rate your video.
Countdown, yep.
Hits me every time, and then several hours later it clears up, and I'm like, how good is your automated system if we have a 85% failure rate?
Yeah.
How? Like, you use me
Great
as the study of why it's not working. I was like, because I don't know what other people are experiencing. And I don't really talk about it that much because we've gone so out of the way to make sure that every video is monetized in some way.
Yeah.
And it also, at a certain point, even if you raise awareness on an issue, it just sounds like whining.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
okay,
right.
we
sure.
care. But yeah, just figuring it out. Matt, actually, kind of on the note of YouTube again.
Sure.
What do you think? I'm going to make this about me.
Great.
That's what YouTubers
Absolutely.
do.
Let's do it.
What do you think drives me?
What drives you, huh?
Yeah. This one's a question from the thing.
Oh, okay. I'm like, okay, that's not sure. No, I think for you, I think it's probably a couple of different things, right? I think you see, and I think you've been pretty public about this, right? Where you see where the news and news coverage is, and you think that there's a better way of doing it, right? Like that there is a way that isn't, you have to be one side or another to watch and enjoy this, but that there's kind of like a straight middle path that is, allowing the audience to kind of judge for themselves based off of the facts. And that digital media is able to, egalitize the spread of information in a way that no one is really taking advantage of, and that isn't, forcing you to either ascribe to like us versus them mentalities. I also think what drives you is a desire to care for your family and loved ones, right? I think that's what any of us who started on the platform to build a community, to find a voice, things like that, why we've continued, right, is to build out something that allows us to protect and care for those that we love most in the world. And maybe to some extent, you don't necessarily strike me as what I call an empire builder, the people who are just in it to like build a giant thing and then to have a legacy for yourself. But I do think that, there's enough of you that is driven by a need or a desire to create something that outlives yourself, that does something for good, right? And it goes back to that initial goal of, making news reporting or content and sharing of information and current events better. And that can go on beyond Phil DeFranco as host, but, kind of shape how we consume news in a more positive way moving forward. How'd I do?
I love that answer. You said it better than no. Yeah, when it comes to the empire stuff, I think that over the past decade, what I've ended up realizing is a lot of the time, I feel like I was trying to build something past myself because I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm glad that I did it in certain avenues because it helped me come across some of the most talented people that I've ever worked with, and the funniest people, especially with like SourceFed. But yeah, I think what I've realized is I care more about the interaction that I have with the audience, and also like my personal life, which is why I would like, next year when I'm talking about like I'm gonna drastically change things,
Sure.
I also just need to see how November and December pan out
I was
just for
gonna
everyone in the world. Like a big change is more of just like a change of pace.
Yeah.
Right. Something that we've experienced is like we don't have to say Monday to Thursday.
Yep.
What if it was 2 to 4 videos over the course of several days, and we figure that out.
Yep.
So we're not having to force news, because I think that's something when you say doing news different, sometimes you realize that you end up becoming part of the problem that you thought you were fixing.
Yeah.
Right. So part of the problem of our news right now is that the 24/7 nature of it. Now, obviously there's something that is constantly happening.
Right.
Or there are more and more things that are happening these days, but by doing it 24/7, you have to make everything seem as important.
Yes. Yep.
Which it just isn't.
Yep.
And so you end up becoming part of the problem that way. And there's also a fine line that I've had to try to find, because I look back to even some of my coverage over 3 years ago, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, like there's false equivalencies left and right.
Sure.
I want people to be able to come to a conclusion on their own.
Yep.
But like, how am I being like, this side said this side this is fucking just almost a complete lie. and I'm acting like they're equivalents. And so it's like, how do you try and promote someone to be skeptical,
Yep.
but not do the thing that we've seen a lot of, kind of, I hate doing anything that's with a broad brush, as some might do, where you paint anything that is even remotely connected to the mainstream as immediately fake.
Yeah.
Immediately wrong.
Yeah.
Because like there was already depleted trust in media
Yeah.
before
Sure.
This administration. Understandably, I think there needs to be a distrust, a skepticism.
Yep.
But like this, everything is fake.
Yeah.
Right. And the only way that you can get the real stuff is to come to me.
Right.
It's like, you need to more people need to understand it. I've been accidentally guilty of it, and people can project like intent, as we kind of talked
Sure.
about. A lot of the people that are doing that are doing it for personal financial gain.
Yep.
The only place you can trust is me. And it's like, no, there's a lot of places. If anything,
Yep.
it's why we've also, even though we've kind of accidentally dabbled in those waters in the past, it's constantly like, look at a lot of places. Don't immediately go like, yes, that's the thing I agree with, because like they don't want you to know.
Right.
Oh, they don't want me to know. It must be true.
Yeah.
Like you got to still come at it and try to educate yourself, and not see one thing and go, yes, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So it's the problem is, it's like you're trying to teach people while also actively learning in a landscape that's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and a lot of that, it's funny. That's always been kind of one of the sub goals of our channels, right? Is, I mean, for as stupid as it is, my dad taught me at a very early age to keep your mind open to alternative viewpoints. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist, but he was very much into learning about conspiracy theories and like, understanding the arguments that were being made, and then researching for himself the stuff that, what's the truth behind those things. He was very much into exploring other religions. He was very much into like just exposing himself to as many opposing and differing ideas as possible so he could draw his own conclusions from an educated perspective. And for me, with the channel, I'm sure it didn't initially start that way, but I think, that mentality that my dad instilled in me has really been important for me as we've made this into a, nearly 10-year business now, where like it's something dumb like, is Mario actually the hero of Super Mario? Like it's dumb, but it's also getting you to, question the perspective from where the story is being told. Right? Like, what if you were the Goomba? What if you were Bowser or whatever? And there's an interesting story to be had there. And my hope is that it just teaches the audience to not always take things at face value, and to at least question the underlying motives, the actual intentions, look at people through their actions, and ask, like, why would someone tell me this story in this way? Is there another perspective? And I think that's the thing that has me most worried in 2020, right? Beyond any pandemics or world events or things like that, I think social media and, clickbait headlines and people being unwilling to do their own research or verify information from multiple different sources and do some of the legwork, I think that's a really dangerous trend. And I think we're on this very slippery slope where, and again, it goes back, like, I think it's funny that all of this is connected, but like, it goes back to, you can apologize for something and no, only a subset of people are going to see it. Like, you can retract something and only a subset of people are going to see it. We're in this vicious cycle of the clickbait negative news gets all the attention and all the engagement, which tells the algorithm this is the stuff that people want to see. And it's also the thing that's getting the money or whatever, which then feeds back into, your timeline. It tells the media company this is what we need to produce. And it creates this, false, belief or like incomplete belief about what's actually going on in the world. And I think, I wish that media literacy and the willingness to question information that's being presented to you, and not to like an extreme degree, but like a little bit of skepticism from people, it would be so beneficial, I think, because these systems are so easy to exploit, and the algorithms right now are just going with it. I'd be curious. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's my fear. But I'd love, as someone who's actively like working in that field, I'd love to get your perspective on it.
With what specific question?
Oh, just in terms, like, I don't know. Am I being too fatalistic with all of this? Like,
no, I think we're in a really scary place, and I mean, it's very easy, and I don't think it's something that should just be kind of swept away. Like, I genuinely think that places like Facebook, for example, are a massive part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if there is a company that benefits the most from it, probably Facebook. I think Facebook, and obviously this could be my bias, I think that Facebook mentions changes to try to placate. I think that YouTube is genuinely trying to like manage this line of how do we not fuck over every creator,
right?
But at the same time, not push anti-vax bullshit,
right?
Or things at that kind of threshold. And they go through certain things of like trying to make sure that, as stupid as it is, or I don't know how helpful it actually is in the real world, of like whenever we talked about like COVID-19 on a video, it was like there's a link in an article to educate yourself that we're not active, even if it's gaining views in some way, that it's not actively monetizing. Now there's an argument to be made of, well, you're still bringing people to those things, but how do you handle the funnel so it doesn't feel like censorship, or is not censorship? It doesn't even matter about feel. It's hard, and I think that's the unfortunate thing, is it's definitely better for my business when I'm like, fucking YouTube, can you believe YouTube? And the unfortunate thing is, by being on the platform for the past 14 years and having conversations with some of the people that I still don't see eye to eye with on certain things, knowing that a lot of the intent is to actually try and combat manipulation and bad actors that are trying to sow discourse isn't even the right thing, of just like putting bullshit lies out there. Yeah, just especially stuff that divides us even more.
Right. Yeah, it's not sowing discourse, it's just muddying the waters, right?
To the point that, like, how many times can you like there's sometimes I still see claims and I'm like, is that real? Like that goes against everything that I just researched. Is what that person just said real?
Right.
And so and just because it's there, it instills a seed of doubt. Now, luckily, this is my job, so I have the time to then further research. But it makes me go like, oh shit, for Joe Blow, it just becomes a talking point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And as long as it was printed in one headline from one website somewhere, then it's a valid thing, right? And it's going to stick with some people, and no amount of disproving or here's the alternative sources or whatever is sometimes going to change that person's mind.
Hey, it's my dumb face again. I hope you're still enjoying the podcast. I wanted to thank one of the sponsors of today's episode of A Conversation With right now, StitchFix.com/DeFranco. Wouldn't it be great if every clothing store that you shopped at had only your size, what styles you like, and the price that you want? Well, there's actually a company that's focused on making that happen. Stitch Fix is a personal styling company that makes getting the clothes that you love effortless. It's a completely different way to shop that's all about you, which honestly, as someone that just hates shopping, I very much appreciate. And it's incredibly simple to get started. You just go to StitchFix.com/DeFranco, you set up your profile, and they deliver great looks personalized just for you and your colors, styles, and budget. You just pay a $20 styling fee for each fix, which is credited towards anything you keep. You can schedule at any time, there's no subscription required, and shipping, returns, and exchanges are easy, and best of all, free. Stitch Fix does the hard work for you, making great style effortless for everybody, including men, women, women and kids. So get started today over at stitchfix.com/DeFranco and you'll get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/DeFranco in case you have a bad memory like me. But with that said, back to the podcast. In these kind of weird times that we're living in right now, obviously, like maybe it touches to a certain degree on kind of even your content in general. It kind of forces you, or maybe the intent was to look at stuff from a different angle, right? I think the past several months have allowed people to look at their life in a different way, look at their previous activities. Even if it's like a small thing for me, I'm like, I'm never like not going to a party that I was invited to before. After this, like I'm going. I've been of the mindset of I always just want to be invited just so I can say no and actually do my own thing and be an introvert. No, I'm going out. But
you have the perpetual excuse now. It's great.
What do you think is the biggest lesson or the biggest thing that you're learning right now?
Ooh, right now? Man, I think what I'm learning right now, and I think the lesson that all of us hopefully are learning right now, is the importance of working together towards a common goal, right? Where right now, I think there's two things. I think that's one, and then there's...
I like that you thought you were the fatalist, and I'm just like, but we can't even fucking all wear masks. Well, I don't think we can.
Well, and like I said, I hope that's the lesson that people are learning, right? But you see other countries who are able to like nip things in the bud immediately because they're all like, okay, this is for the good of everyone, let's do it. And then like 3 weeks later, hey, we're all good. And I think, you know, in America, it's a harder ask because we are so individualistic. We are, you know, self-determining in a lot of ways. We protect our freedoms and this and that. But I think there are those times where you do have to step back and be like, hey, we have to, you know, take a couple maneuvers to protect everyone and, you know, to help those who can't help themselves in a lot of cases. And I think, to me, 2020 has really emphasized that, whether it's, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, kind of, and its resurgence, or, you know, the responses to the pandemic and things like that. It shows like, hey, there are certain greater goods out there that do merit everyone putting a hold on their life and saying like, hey, maybe this is inconvenient for me, maybe this isn't that great for me or whatever, but like, let me put a hold on it and support, you know, the people who can't support themselves. And I think that's a really big lesson from 2020. And then from like a societal standpoint, and then from and how great things and change can happen quickly if you're all in agreement and working towards the same goal. And I think that's the trick. Is in America, that's been a bit of a struggle, but in other places of the world, it's like, oh yeah, they got it together and they took care of it. The other thing that I would say on the personal level though is the importance of family, right? Where it's so easy to get lost in the day-to-day rush of get another video out, take these meetings, you know, do this interview, push, forward. And 2020, I think, has been kind of that reset button of take a step back, take a little bit, as things shut down, as you're stuck in the house, whatever, take a step back and reassess how you're doing for yourself and how you're doing for the people in your immediate surroundings, and how important that family unit is, and how important it is to spend time together, meaningful quality time, because all it takes is one thing and suddenly they're gone, one sickness and suddenly that person disappears, right? And you lose them forever. And coming out of this, you know, like even through the pandemic and stuff, we've been, you know, making changes so that way, like, Steph and I can spend more time not talking about work and spend more time with Oliver, where it's not us frustrated, you know, like eager to get him to bed so we can do more work or whatever, but rather like, hey, let's all just spend quality time together. And I think that's the other thing for me personally that's been really coming out of this.
How do you work with your spouse and not kill each other? I'm intrigued by that. Even like I haven't had to try and do it in a while, but I remember like 10 years ago me trying to shoot my show in a loft while my then girlfriend was like doing schoolwork upstairs, and like the slight sound would go off and I'm like, what are you doing? You don't respect what I'm doing. I don't know why I sound like an angry dad in the 50s. I don't know what I think I was much nicer than that. But,
I'm gonna get you. Raise your fist.
But I mean, wait, so how long have you been together and how long have you worked together?
So we've been together since sophomore year of college. So long time at this point. Like I said, it's been over a decade. I think it's maybe around like 13 years, something like that. Yeah, I'm old man Matt Pet here. And I think what helps the relationship, honestly, is we met in a video game programming course. So we both needed a math credit in order to pass, or we both needed a math credit in order to graduate, right? Neither of us wanted to take three-dimensional calculus, because why would you take three-dimensional calculus willingly?
Oh, that just sounds horrible.
Right, it's the worst, right? And so both independently, we talked to friends, we discovered that there was this computer programming course where you made video games, and not only was it fun, it was an easy A and a math credit. And so it's like the triple win when it comes to choosing a college course. And so we both independently like wound up in this course. We ended up sitting next to each other, and over the course of that semester, it was always the two of us competing for the best game of the week, right? Like everyone would present their games or whatever, and it was always the two of us competing against each other for whose was like the most polished or the best or whatever. And so at the end of the semester, you had to partner up with one person to create like one big final game. And I kind of had a crush on Steph. I thought she was really cute. She would come from dance class every day, and I'm like, ooh, she's a dancer. That's cool. I'm a theater guy. That's a big win. She gets me. She gets the artistry. And so I'm like, hey, could we work together? And she's like, yeah. And it was the first time in my life that it wasn't me having to carry the entire group project. I hated group. I swore off group projects. They were the worst thing through middle school and high school. Hated them with the passion of 1,000 suns. Because everyone always sucks. And you're scrambling last minute to do it all, and they don't show up at the library even though you send them 3 reminders. And so Stephanie was the first person who not only was excited to do to be a part of the group and also carry her own weight, but also like far surpass what we were planning. Like I very distinctly remember our last meeting was like, okay, the presentations tomorrow, wouldn't it have been cool if we had added, a fireball mechanic and a dating simulation at the end and this and that. I wake up the next morning and she's like, oh, I did all that. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
And yeah, and so so we've been doing group projects since the very beginning of our relationship. And the nature of those projects have shifted and evolved over the years, but we like to say that we're still doing projects to this day.
That's beautiful. So much so that it's disgusting.
Sorry.
No, that's great. No,
too
man,
syrupy
that's great.
sweet. Sorry.
No, but I love that because it comes from it sounds like it was a relationship that, I mean, you could find someone attractive, but is like built on respect of the other person, of like of a thing that you are also passionate about.
Yeah,
which is
it
actually kind of rare.
Yeah, it was very like the joke that we always make is like we were attracted to each other's work ethic, and then everything else came after. I mean, because honestly,
and everything else luckily lined up. That's
great. For the first, for almost the first year that we were working together and knew each other, she thought I was gay, so that was also part of it. Where
do you think some of that stemmed from like stereotypes of being a theater kid?
Oh, 100%. Like, and also I was very over the top and very extra in college. I would wear bright lime green suits to class because I'm like, whatever, and I was always asking people, come to my theater show. And I would like sing not in the middle of class, but like after class and this and that. And she never saw me like with another girl or anything, so she just kind of like assumed, I think, which I guess fortunately gave me the chance to like slip in unnoticed as like the gay best friend role. Surprise reveal was me the entire time.
You're like, what? Fooled. I always, growing up, I had like this respect for whether it was just projected or real confidence from theater kids, but it was always interesting to me. And it was something I didn't realize until really like when I looked back on it, of like how theater kids, it's their own world. Like it's 1,000%. Like I was, the only reason I even got into musicals was because I want to say like 3-4 months dated this girl that was super, super into theater. She introduced me to Moulin Rouge and then Chicago.
Oh,
and,
sure.
and maybe not Chicago, I don't know, but got me into it, and I was like, oh my god, apparently I love musicals. This is amazing, and like I'm glad I had that relationship.
You caught
for
the
that,
bug.
but it was I worked with her, but then I would realize that 90% of her time was just hanging out or just about the theater world, and I was and unfortunately I was kind of her placeholder boyfriend.
Oh no.
Because I think she was trying to figure out if this guy that she liked was gay or not.
Sure.
And,
so you were the holding pattern. My God.
I was the holding pattern. It was a lot of cuddling and watching musicals. But yeah, it was interesting. Have you ever experienced a dynamic like that ever again?
What with
theater kids, or did you not have that experience?
Oh no, like part of the reason I wanted to get out of theater and kind of move on to different fields and a different career path was largely because theater people, like you said, like they live, breathe, and think about theater, and so every conversation that I was having with my theater friends was always about like, what show did you audition for? What show are you going to audition for? What show would you be perfect for? What are you singing at your audition? What roles did you just get back from for your like summer stock theater or whatever? Like all that we could ever really talk about was theater and how good or bad a certain show was or what shows are coming up. Like it was always so linear and theater focused that I felt like I wanted to have conversations about other things, but I really struggled to like find people who were willing to engage with me about other stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why I ended up kind of being like, hey, maybe this isn't the right thing for me. Because there really is a truth, like in the industry of theater, there's always the saying that gets tossed around of like, if you can live with yourself doing anything but theater, do it. Because theater,
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that like if you're in the theater community, there's a chance that you've heard it before, and it's really, I mean, it's pretty true. Where theater doesn't pay great. Even in success on Broadway, it's not great. It is incredibly intensive work, round the clock. You're not respected in the way that like film professionals and like people who make movies are. Even TV actors are respected more than theater people in a lot of cases. And and a lot of times too, like the shows that you're doing are pretty thankless. You're working in black box theaters. They may or may not get shown. Like it's a brutal industry, and every 3 months or a year or whatever, you're out of work because the show closed and you're back to square one. And so you have to start auditioning again and grinding and hitting the pavement. And so, if you can find happiness doing anything other than theater, you can. But there are just some people who that it fills a need in their life that nothing else can fill. It scratches the itch. And for me, like, as someone who had a lot of interests, I think I was able to find a passion doing something else, but I totally understand that theater mentality. But yeah, it just wasn't for me.
Is there something from that time or from theater that you think you utilize in your videos or in your life in any way now?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, so I wasn't only an actor, I was also doing a lot of directing work as well. And so a lot about, from the directorial side, about how to guide a viewer's, like how are they watching things on stage? How do you direct their attention to certain parts of the stage? That all plays into actually how we animate a lot of our videos, where, we'll predict or kind of see where an audience member is going to be watching the screen. And then we'll kind of like guide their eyes based on animations and things like that, which is all directorial techniques. But that's getting into the granular. If you take it a step up, one of the most exciting things about doing theatrical productions is how collaborative of a medium it is and how valuable it is for you as a director or as a theater professional to have a lot of tools in your tool belt to understand lighting, to understand sound, to understand all the elements of theater in order to fuse it into what makes this great product. And then being able to trust your lighting designer and set designer and stuff to add to it and to collaborate with you. It's a very collaborative medium. And, a lot of YouTubers are doing this just themselves. They're editing themselves, this and that. From very early on in our channel's history, we were very much doing, collaborate. Like I was very eager to work with an editor and be like, you understand editing to a level I don't get. So let me give you my thoughts, you give me your thoughts, and together we'll create something that's really cool. As a director, I gave a lot of notes to the cast and crew and things like that. And so to this day, I'm still giving, 40, 50 notes every episode about like, what can we tweak? How can we like refine this? How is the audience consuming the information, and how can we better communicate that to them in a way that kind of sells the dramatic arc a little bit better? So yeah, theater actually, it's funny. Theater plays a lot into how we construct videos nowadays, in ways that I think make for a better end product.
Man, I feel like you inadvertently, you kind of answered this by even saying that 3D calculus was a possibility for you. Were you always a really smart kid in school? You did
yes.
well?
I don't want to say yes because it's one of those like, oh, look at how smart I was, but yeah, like
if you're talking about like, just the reason I had such an adverse reaction is like I thought I was like smart because I was like, oh, I took AP calculus, but the thing that I sucked at in math, oddly, was geometry. So when you said 3D, I was like, oh no, this sounds like a bad time. It sounds like a bad time.
Yeah. No, I always loved learning, and talking about the channels again, but like I was fortunate enough to have really excellent teachers in my early elementary career. Middle school kind of sucked, but in high school they were good again. Middle school sucks forever, and I feel like. But they instilled in me this like desire for intellectual curiosity, and I was excited to go to school every day. I was excited to learn. I was excited to ask questions, and I know a lot of people aren't that fortunate. And so again, like one of the goals of the channel is always to like pay it forward. Like, hey, I was excited to learn about these things. Maybe physics was really boring to you, or you didn't understand it, or you had a bad teacher. Let me at least share some of my enthusiasm with you guys, and maybe you can walk away with something. But no, I had a perfect 1600 on my SAT. I got straight A. Like, if I'm bragging, I might as well. Like, I had straight A pluses through literally my entire 12 years of school. Like, I never got anything less than an A plus.
Do you speak another language?
What's that?
Do you speak another language?
No.
Thank God there's one thing. There's one thing.
That's the one thing that I really regret. Right now, I'm in the process of teaching myself Japanese, so that way I can speak with Oliver, who the Google Home act like one day was playing Tangled music and then auto played Tangled in Japanese, and he immediately latched on to, oh, this sounds like the same song, but it's slightly different. What is that? Yeah. And so Steph and I explained, oh, it's a foreign language. And so now he's like, Tangled Japanese, Tangled Japanese, Tangled Japanese. And so I'm like, I know this is coming, so let me hop on Duolingo and start learning the hiragana and the katakana, because at some point you're going to really want to dive into this. So let me come in prepared. Were
your parents academics, or what did they do?
No, not at all. They actually will actively say, like, we don't know where you got it from. My dad works as a lab tech at a powder paint company, so he tests the clear coat that they spray on cars to protect it from acid rain and the elements and things like that. But you ask him like, oh, that sounds smart, and he's always like, no, I just do the same thing day in and day out and spray panels. And then my mom was a bank teller, or is a bank teller. So I think like what they did, I think that was really helpful, though, was, again, like, just quality time. They were incredibly invested in my education, where, they would ask me about every day at school. They would, be eager to see what homework I was doing, and they would ask me to teach them stuff like that. And so,
oh, wow.
Yeah, they loved that. They instilled in me a love of learning by their participation in it. And I think that's what really got me going down the line of like, hey, I just want to consume as much information as possible and synthesize it.
That's really like a progressive teaching and parenting to like switch roles. Yeah. It's like something that they actively tell you to do now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's, I don't know, and I'm the only child. And so I don't know what prompted them to kind of approach it from that perspective. They'll always tell this story about how I had like a bunch of books when I was growing up, and at one point I like cited a phrase from a book as well as the page number in like a multi-volume set. And they're like, that was the moment that we knew that you were smart. And we wanted to kind of foster that as much as possible in whatever way we could as people who weren't necessarily as blessed with that gift. And so, I guess they found kind of the right way to do it, because I ended up loving learning, and it's carried through since.
Being the only child, do you feel like they treated you like a person earlier on?
Yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. I can't really think, I mean, obviously I wouldn't remember, but like very much so we were always the trio. It was always the three of us, and we did things together, and I was an adult and I had an equal say in what we were doing and how we were doing it, or at least like my voice was heard in the conversation, in a way that, like you said, a lot of parents might not necessarily think of, like, oh, this is a kid, their voice doesn't matter as much or anything like that.
Yeah. Let's stick with your childhood, Matt.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
What was your first kiss?
Wow. Oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
Okay. My first kiss was lip to lip or lip to cheek, Phil.
I love that you're like, I got both down in my dream journal when I remembered them.
Let me pull out my diary with the hearts.
Let's go lips to lips.
Lip to lip. Okay, so that was, what would it have been? It was sophomore year of high school.
Okay. You were a late bloomer like me.
Yeah, late. Yeah, definitely late. I had a lot of girlfriends, but I feel like they always, one, we were never really physical, but then two, like, they always ended up like cheating on me or going with some other cuter boy or whatever, and so I'm always like, oh man, always getting left at the doorstep. So sophomore year of high school, I was in the musical How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and which is a great musical. As a musical fan yourself, I hear. If you haven't checked out, you totally should.
I'm very mainstream.
Okay,
I need to dive deeper.
Well, How to Succeed is a classic. It's great. Daniel Radcliffe was in a Broadway revival of it, and he did a passable job, which is more than most celebrities do in those sorts of situations. But my character had to kiss another character on stage, right? And I didn't really want my first kiss to be a stage kiss, right? And so, and lo and behold, I had a crush on this girl. It might have just been a showmance, because that's another thing that theater does with you, is it messes with your head when you have to have a romantic relationship with someone. And so I had a crush on her, right? And so I'm like, hey, I really like, so before I'm like, I'm going all in. I'm like, hey, I really like you. Can we start dating? Yes. And so we ended up kissing in the cafeteria right beside some payphones, and that was like a little peck on the lips, and that was like my first kiss. And then we were all ready to kiss every night on stage for How to Succeed in Business.
And then did it just stop? Did it stop after you were done performing?
No, it stopped because she wanted to move a lot faster than I did, actually. She was a very physical person, and I was not comfortable with that. And so I'm like, hey, we're going a little bit quickly. Can we slow it down? And she really didn't want to. And it was getting to the point where I'm like, I feel icky about a lot of what's going on. So like, hey, I need to end it. And that's what happened.
Something when you were talking about even that, but then like all the way back to talking about, reading a book with your son.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. The main thing that I miss about 18 and younger, and more specifically even being younger, is how big everything felt.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that when that bison page is coming up, there's like that feeling.
Yeah.
There was that feeling now before he loved it.
Right.
And like, or like, even when you started like being like, oh my God, I like girls.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I love you. This is the most I've ever felt about someone I've ever seen. I miss that because I feel like we get inundated with so much these days.
Yeah.
It's hard to even stick with a feeling for that long.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I wish there was a way to do it, but I know that we all have that option to just put the phone away.
Right.
I know that we have the option to like just be outside, like, and we act like victims to our technology and our opportunity.
No, you're totally right. That like I agree. Like, and I think that's one of the exciting things about having kids, right? Is it kind of forces your perspective back down, and you do kind of see it for the first time again. Of like every time he gets exposed to a new thing, it's his like first time seeing it, or it's his first time understanding it, and his world just got a little bit bigger, and his world just got a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and like you see him understanding and synthesizing information and making connections, and it's really cool to go through that process as an outsider looking in, and you get to kind of recapture that magic a little bit. And it's a bit of a,
maybe it is because even now at a younger age, or I mean, a lot of it happened when I think you're 33 or 34.
Yep, 33.
You're younger than me, I think. Yeah. All of a sudden, the world was as big as it was ever going to get.
Yeah.
It was there. Like, we have access.
Right.
It's all there. A lot of it now gets pushed to us rather than the pull.
Right.
Maybe that's what it is.
Well, and I think you're totally right. Like, it's a bit of a double-edged sword too, because you see all the news stories about how this younger generation is more socially conscious and wanting to change the world that they live in, and this and that, in a way that previous generations haven't been. And I think it's largely because they're exposed to the breadth of the world much sooner because of the connectedness that social media and the internet provides, right? And so, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, it's like, hey, making those changes and pushing for the societal change is great, and you are kind of forced to become mature adults that much faster, but you do lose a little bit more of that like blissfully not ignorant, but like that blissfully small worlded time of like, my world is my school, my high school, my crush, whatever. I don't need to know about the political situation in China or the injustices that are happening over in New York when I live on the other side of the country. Like, it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect you and your immediate, but it is one of those so like, it's a good and bad thing, I think.
Hey, I hope you're still enjoying the podcast. This is me just taking a second to thank one of the sponsors of today's episode of A Conversation With, Drops. During the last few months, we've all become more and more conscious of our own cleanliness, especially since so many of us have been quarantined in our homes, and that's where Drops comes in. Drops delivers eco-friendly cleaning products directly to your door that contain plant-based ingredients. Their products are effective and great for the planet with carbon-neutral shipping. Drops even pioneered the laundry detergent pod back in 2005, way before other brands, being the first to say goodbye to those huge jugs of detergent. They've got pods for sensitive skin, babies, stains and odors, a chlorine-free bleach alternative called Oxy Booster Pods, as well as reusable wool dryer balls that can replace your normal disposable dryer sheets for over 1,000 loads. They even have dishwasher detergent pods too. Guided by convenience with a conscience, Drops ships in recyclable, compostable packaging, whereas traditional liquid detergents use high-density polyethylene bottles, 68% of which contribute to 660 billion pounds of plastic waste annually that all end up in our oceans and waterways. And if you're wondering, yes, they are compatible with all washing machines. With 10,000 5-star reviews, Drops has truly proven to be a game changer. So to check them out, just head on over to drops.com/Franco to get $15 off your first order and subscribe to save 25% plus free carbon neutral shipping. But with all that said, thank you, you're welcome, and now back to the podcast. What's something from your childhood that you loved in general or loved doing that you no longer do, and why?
Ooh, something that I loved when I was a child and no longer do. Oh, that's a really good question. I would say, for a while there, it was actually playing video games for fun. Yeah,
I recommend going back to it, man. I used to stream, and it definitely took a lot of the joy out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are definitely moments where you get to experience like a story game together or like this really cool like win. But then, a lot of it, you're performing.
Yeah, well, once you start making a business or monetizing your hobby or your passion or whatever, it fundamentally changes your relationship to it. I went through the same thing in theater, honestly, where when I was a professional in theater and I was touring around working as an actor and director, it was one of those things where I would go see shows and I could not enjoy them anymore because I was so fixated on, oh, that was a bad blocking decision. Oh, that lighting cue happened too early. Oh, that actor in the background isn't fully into it or missed his choreography or whatever. Like, I was so analytical toward it that I couldn't step back and like just go along for the ride and enjoy it. And it took me about 6 years after leaving theater for me to be able to go back to a show again and just sit back and be like, this is great. It's fun to be immersed in this world and just appreciate it for what it is and not be nitpicky and not be critical. And with gaming, it went through the same thing, right? Where when we started a gaming channel, it was like, there it was. And now all of a sudden I'm like picking apart games and I'm playing games to analyze them and not to actually like enjoy them. And I'm trying to predict things and immerse myself too much into it. And so it lost a lot of the magic and a lot of the de-stressing that video games had for me back throughout my entire life. And I think now I've gotten to a point where I've settled into a rhythm, and I found that balance. Again, it's all about balance, and I found that balance of I can appreciate the game and I can go along for the ride, and I have my games that are just for me that I'm not going to be doing theories about because it either doesn't make sense to or I don't want to, and I can just appreciate them for myself. And then there are the games that I'm, playing and studying and stuff for the channel and for the business and for a video. And
what are those games that are personal that you can appreciate?
Personal games? For me, I could play Mario Maker to infinity. And you literally can play Mario Maker to infinity because there's an infinite number of levels. But man, I'm very much a completionist gamer. I love the sense of accomplishment that you get from overcoming a really hard challenge or like a really precise jump or a really difficult boss battle. And, so Mario Maker allows me to experience levels that are at a difficulty that is so far beyond what Nintendo would ever be able to reasonably produce. And that is my game. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so I'm
so the opposite.
Really? Are you just like a tune out?
Like when you mentioned Mario Maker, I was like, I just think of like rage runs that you see online where you're just like, no. And it's the same reason why I've never even tried to play games like Dark Souls. I'm just like, that seems like anything that could result in my blood pressure going higher up. And it's not related to the horrible food that's going in my body.
Of course.
I'm like, no. I'm like Ghost of Tsushima.
Yep.
Boom. Great. I'm doing that. Last of Us 2. Doing that.
Yeah.
Though I will say, like, even it feels like, there are people that, they game for business, stuff like that. But now that everyone is a professional critic. Essentially, that's what Twitter has done. I was like, I didn't even want to tweet that I enjoyed Last of Us 2 because it was like at a time where everyone was like angry about stuff that I wasn't even aware of.
Yep.
I was like, I didn't mind her. Abby was fine. I was surprised I got to play her.
It wasn't so bad.
It made me see the story from a different angle. I don't know. I was like, I mean, maybe I would have changed something, but that's fucking weird for me to say since I'm not a storyteller. But how
dare you have an opinion about something that you like?
But that was
Phil.
the thing is like I was like, I felt like I was like, it was a secret that I had to like just tell my friends.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't like that. It took that joy away from me.
Yeah.
But then maybe that's a joy that's taken away from everything now that, we know so much more about the way that everything is made.
Yeah.
Or the ins and outs are. I mean, there were several reasons with that game specifically. I think people were taking aim, some justified, some completely off base. But yeah.
Now that you see how the sausage gets made. No, but I think you're totally right. Like there are certain opinions that you can put out onto the internet, and Last of Us 2 was just one of those where you couldn't say that you like the game. Like no matter what, but you are going to attract anger from someone somewhere, and it's just going to dogpile, and which is sad, right? Like. To be able to express joy or like, hey, I liked this thing. I know everyone else, but it's fine. Like, and so those are the times where...
if it was a story that I was going to cover in my show, I'd be like, okay, this is something, but it's not something I want to put the time into.
Right.
I was like, let me just feel something, man.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly it, is you feel it for yourself and you don't need that external validation or to put it out there. It's like, you know what? I'll let the internet hash this one out for themselves. I'm just going to appreciate it quietly in my own corner of the universe.
Is there a game that you love that is generally unliked?
Ooh, game that is generally unliked. I like a lot of Sonic games that the internet just rakes through the coals.
Like which ones? Like the newer ones or what?
Oh, I mean, basically any Sonic game that isn't from the original Genesis has been just utterly decimated, and are just jokes. And to be fair, like the channel, we make fun of the games too because like that's the popular opinion, and that's funny and this and that. But I like a lot of Sonic games. I think.
What was one of the ones that I feel like it came out in the past 5 years that it had like 3D elements, but it felt like very much like you were on rails. There were a lot of like.
There was Sonic Generations, which is like had 2D Sonic and 3D Sonic, which is like my favorite Sonic game. I think it was brilliant.
Okay.
Sonic 06 is the one that like everyone just rakes through the coals because it was a glitchy, poorly optimized mess. But I appreciate it for the jankiness of it. Actually, I think it's just stupid fun. You got to be super patient with it, but it's fun. And I grew up playing glitchy games too, so glitchy and like jankily made games is kind of par for the course for me. There was also Sonic Boom, which was that one wasn't great.
That.
Yeah, that one wasn't great. I'm trying to think of the one that you were on rails. Are you thinking like Sonic Unleashed?
There'd be like literally 3 rails, and you'd be like jumping from one to the other.
That's sorry, I hate to break it to you, Phil, but that's kind of become a pretty regular mechanic for a lot of the Sonic games at this point.
I mean, because one of the last Sonic games that I remember genuinely enjoying was actually for the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Because you got to have that
iconic,
that little dude. Yeah. But I don't know. I've recently in the past few months gotten into a few because my son is like randomly loves Sonic. I was glad the Sonic movie came out. It's like one of his favorite things.
Oh, awesome.
And I was like, okay. Yeah. I was like, great, you love it. And I think that's one of the things is understanding that not everything, seeing it through his eyes makes me realize like not everything's made for me.
Yeah.
So like, because the Sonic game that I'm specifically thinking of was just the difficulty level was like the lowest out of any Sonic game I've ever played.
Sure.
Because I mean, when I think of old school Sonic, I definitely attach like, it's one of those things that I can't remember if it was a hard game or it was hard for me then. Which I think is always hard. But yeah, now especially because I don't have to any game that's like easy and fun, I'm for it because he is not a happy loser. He's like that's like the number one thing we're trying to learn is like being not only being a gracious winner.
Yeah.
So you don't call me some stupid name because I was taking it easy on you and you happen to win. Yep. Because otherwise I'm about to wreck you in this game. But then being a good loser.
Oh my gosh, I was the worst loser when I was growing up. I'm still a pretty bad loser to this day, but I'm a lot better than I was. That was a lesson that was hard learned from Matthew Patrick over in his child. If you're talking about my childhood, that was one that my parents struggled to teach me and did their best, but I don't know to this day. But I still need to be a lesson
I know the
learned.
Solution. I'm just always going to win.
Right.
That's the only way I get through this life. 1600 SAT. Perfect.
Right. So this Dark Souls boss absolutely needs to fall within like 3 attempts.
All right, Matt.
Yeah.
We're getting very close to the end.
Sure.
What are the 3 best qualities in a person in your life?
Wow. Man.
I like that we were like in the childhood, kisses.
Right.
Now what about the people around you?
Man, this is intense.
I mean, I feel like part of it might be represented by Steph. But outside of that, because she's going to be a glowing figure in this.
Sure.
Otherwise.
No, of course, right? And as someone who has like literally 0 friends, that's the only person around me in my life.
How many people around you do you think you would call a friend, and not like friendlies? Like, I like you. I think you like me, but we're not hanging out. We're not landing up.
It's weird, and going back to my childhood again. I've never been much of a hanger-outer person, and I don't know if it's me being an only child or me being so close to my parents when I was growing up, and we chose to do everything together. I had a lot of, like you said, friendlies. Like there were a lot of people that I hung out with at school. Everyone knew me when I like threw a pool party or whatever at like the rec center or something. Like everyone would come, or like everyone I would invite would come or whatever. So like there was a good friend group there, and I had great relationships with everyone. And yet I was never invited to stuff. And I like,
Oof, that feels rough. That way rougher.
yeah, right. And I never understood why. And I didn't know if people didn't think I would come or if they just didn't want me there. Like I never knew why. And and it always kind of made me sad. And so like, that's why I was always the party planner. And I think that's why I was always the person who was like, going back to like what MatPat was before he met Steph, like that's why I was always like let's shuck and jive and entertain people and this and that. Cause if I didn't, I was kind of like left out, I guess. So it was hard for me. So like my definition of friendship has always been like people who I'm not actively like playing games with people or hanging out with them on a regular basis, but like I consider all of our employees friends. Like I've hired on a bunch of my friends because it gives me an excuse to do projects with them and see them on a regular basis. A lot of my connections in the YouTube space, I don't see them often
Do you feel like with being friends with your employees, it changes the dynamic of the friendship?
It does. But what we do going into it is we always explicitly say the friendship comes first. And so, some of the employees who have come on after, like some of them are friends that then become employees. Some of them are employees who become friends.
Sure.
And I think for the friends who become employees, we always go in with the attitude of the friendship has to come first. And if it ever gets to a point where that's in question, we'll just, go separate ways or figure out a way to kind of like alter that relationship. Yeah, and for the employees who become friends, we just hire like really cool, fascinating, fun people, and I love learning from them. And does it change the dynamic? Yeah, I'm probably a lot more lenient in negotiations than I probably should be. But like honestly, like if we're being completely honest, like I should probably be more harder nosed or more. Especially for some employees, there's probably some that I am more forgiving of some of the mistakes that happen and things like that. And that's totally fine. Like I'm fine. Cause I like them. I see that they're a good person and I know that their intentions are good and that, mistakes that happen are innocent or that they're still learning or things like that. But yeah, like when it comes to friend, I think like a lot of my YouTube connections are friends too, like the people like the YouTubers that I kind of like talk to and engage with and things like that. Like we don't talk often, but when we do, it's like, hey, it's on a friendly basis. It's a small pool, which is funny. It's a small pool.
What characteristics then would you say that makes you want to be around them or friends with them or
Sure.
It benefits you?
Yeah, no, I think obviously like reliability or a constancy, I think is a big one where, it's someone who I know isn't going to flake out on me or someone who I know is going to stay like a friend through and through, who isn't going to like turn around and stab you in the back or betray you or like, because there were, like I said, like my girlfriends growing up, like they would always like go to someone else and I'm always like, oh man, like I was committed, man, we were gonna get married. That was
like, thanks for giving me trust issues for the rest of my fucking life.
Right, I know, look at what I'm dealing with now. So I think like that, like consistency, constancy, reliability is one. Self-assuredness I think is one, which is a weird one to say for like a friend or whatever, but because oftentimes I'm not the person who's going to actively be reaching out and being like, hey, let's hang out. And this, like, it's because of how busy things are. Like, it's not in my focus a lot of times. And so having them be self-assured enough in our friendship to know that, like, I still care about them, that I still love them. And if I disappear for a while or don't respond for a while, it's not against them. That's really important. The last thing I want is to have to be like, the psychologist for my friend to say like, no, it's I still love you, like it's totally fine, like, hey, we've both got our lives and we'll come together when it makes sense for us to come together.
I 1,000% what you're saying,
right?
yeah
and like so those are two. And then the other thing I really appreciate in people is them being smart and willing to ask, like smart and or willing to ask intellectual curiosity, open-mindedness. I think like maybe that not smart because I don't really care about that. It's the willingness to have a discussion and tell interesting stories. Because to me, I think so much of life is having a lot of experiences and accumulating stories to tell. And, being eager to listen to other people's stories, tell your stories, and learn from each other. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's the most dynamic way of learning. And it enriches both people's lives because there's a give and take there.
I love that. So I know that much earlier on, you talked about empire builders and stuff like that. And maybe it's connected to this answer.
Sure.
If one day, long from now, you're on your deathbed, what allows you to go peacefully? What allows you to be like, I did this. There was worth here.
Yeah.
And you go happy.
It's funny. I've said since probably high school, I think, that my goal was always to leave the world in some small way better than when I entered it. And whether that was in, like, I'm never going to cure cancer or anything like that, but like, impacting the people around me in some positive way that they can then go forward and pay it forward and on and on. Like, I'm a firm believer in kind of like the pay it forward butterfly effect that happens when you just live your life with positivity and good intentions, that it spreads outward. And honestly, Phil, this is probably the worst thing to say, is like, if I went tomorrow, I would be so sad by the time that I'm losing with the people that I love. And I feel like I have more to give, but I would be able to go peacefully. I'm happy with, I'm so proud of Oliver. I'm so proud of Stephanie. I'm so proud of what Stephanie and I have been able to build together, that, and I'm so proud of the audience who's embraced us and have, educated themselves and spread that education to other people. And I'm really happy with that. And I'm really happy with how blessed we've been. And, if it were all to go away tomorrow, I'd like I said, it would be tragic. And I'd be like, no, it's too early. Put me back. But I'd be like, okay, like I can be satisfied with what I've done.
Is there anything in this specific moment as you're saying that is popping in your head that's making you kind of tear up a little? Is there any specific thing?
No, it's like I said. I think it's, man, I love Stephanie. I love Oliver. I love learning, and I love travel. I love life. I don't drink, and people will ask me a lot of times, like, oh, why don't you drink, or why don't you drink at parties or things? And I'm like, I don't need to, because I'm high on life all the time. And to see it cut short, at a time, 33 or whatever, like, I would hope that I'd have a good couple decades left in me. To see it run short would be a shame, because I don't want to say goodbye to those people. I don't want to say goodbye to those opportunities. I'm not bored yet. I'm not just sitting on the couch. I'm sitting on the couch watching Netflix, but that's because I'm tired. Like, don't get me wrong. I love,
you gotta
watching,
recoup. Yeah.
Yeah, I love watching my TV, but I'm not complacent in my life yet. Like, there's still so much more that I have to give, and so much more time that I want to spend with the people around me, that I would be sad to see it go.
So where I want to end that's beautiful. Where I want to end this is on the thought of the butterfly effect, on the thought of throwing another rock in the pond and setting off some ripples. What's something you would want to say to someone out there right now that you think could better their lives, that could get them closer to what they're looking for, or even something that maybe is emotional intelligence, anything? What do you think it is?
It's interesting. So for someone who's having a hard time, and that's looking for kind of like advice,
and I feel like that's pretty universal right now, because I think a lot of people are having a hard time.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think now more than ever, it's a time to reconnect with the people in your life that you enjoy spending time with, and to find the joy in that relationship, and then, and use that as the crucible through which you get through these hard times. And then once things start opening up, once things start becoming safe again, taking that nugget of joy and being able to expand it outward and give it back to the universe. And I think that's a big part of, like, that's where, at a time when it's hard to find strength, find that strength in that one other person. Or if you don't even have that one other person, which there are people who don't, unfortunately, you know, find it in the thing that you're most passionate about. Find it in your creativity, your fandom, your favorite show, your, you know, whatever gets you excited, whether it's a TV show, movie, cooking, beauty, whatever. Find that kernel of joy and just hold on to it and keep it burning bright. And when the dust settles and the world begins to clear up a little bit, like, use that as your anchor upon which you can build everything else.
Beautiful note to go out.
Thanks. Thanks, Phil.
Matt, thank you for the time. I like you as a person. I'll always resent you for how much smarter I think you are than me, but it was a pleasure, man.
It was awesome getting a chance to actually sit down and have a real conversation with you.
Hey, man, this is me. I'm just monetizing my unofficial therapy with people. That's what's happening.
Right, that's great. I'll give you some free consulting advice on the YouTube side, and you give me some free psychotherapy on my side. Next time,
boom.
Next time we'll address, like, my perfectionism and control freakness. It's perfect.